Your lips move, the words form. You've said this prayer 100 times, maybe 1,000. But somewhere between your mouth and the ceiling, something stops. You sit there, waiting for the thing that used to happen. It doesn't come. You know this silence. Not the peaceful kind, the other one, the hollow one, the one that sounds like an empty room where there used to be a voice you trusted. It didn't start overnight. There was a church, there was a community, there were people you handed your faith to and they mishandled it. Maybe they were careless, maybe they were cruel, maybe they never even understood what they took from you when they left. But something went quiet after that. And here's what no one says out loud. It wasn't just your trust in people that got damaged. Something happened to your prayer. You still showed up to the motions, to the words, to the practiced phrases, but you started praying like someone who isn't sure anyone's listening, like someone trying to reconnect a call on a line that might be dead. And the longer that silence stretched, the harder it became to tell if God went somewhere or if the church hurt just made you deaf to him. I need to tell you something about that silence. Because most of what you've been told, pray more, be patient, push through, most of that assumes the problem is something you can willpower your way past. It's not. Church hurt doesn't just wound your relationship with people. It reconfigures something deeper, the internal sense of whether prayer is even safe, whether intimacy with God is safe, whether being spiritually open again is worth the risk of being spiritually exposed again. Your soul didn't go cold because you stopped caring. It went quiet because it learned something from what happened. It learned that opening up leads to fracture, that trust leads to damage, that the very places where you brought your faith can become the places where it gets used against you. And here's what no one tells you: every time you try to pray past that, to perform your way through it, to fake the warmth you don't feel, you are not healing. You are teaching yourself to survive with the wound sealed shut. There is a moment, maybe you've already had it, where you stop mid-prayer and something in you just admits it. I can't hear him right now. I don't know where he went or where I went. I just know that something that used to be there isn't, and I don't know how to get it back. That admission feels like failure. It's not. It is the first honest thing you've said in prayer since the church hurt happened. Here's what stays hidden in conversations about faith and spiritual disconnection. When we experience a wound in a space we called sacred, when the people holding spiritual authority over us damage us, we don't just lose trust in them. We lose access to the internal architecture that lets us receive intimacy at all. The soul builds walls, not maliciously, protectively. It doesn't stop believing in love, it stops believing that being open to love is survivable. So when you sit down to pray real prayer, the kind where something actually moves between you and God, that requires the walls to come down. And your soul looks at that requirement and it thinks, not yet, not safe, not until I know this won't break me again. This is why spiritual numbness after church hurt doesn't feel like rebellion, it feels like self-preservation. And it is. But there's something the walls don't know, something that changes everything about how you find your way back. After the resurrection, there was a man who couldn't believe. Thomas, he'd seen Christ before, he'd heard the voice, he'd walked alongside the presence for 3 years, and then everything shattered, and in the shattering, something in Thomas closed. He wasn't outside the community, he was still in the room with the other disciples. But he'd gone somewhere unreachable on the inside. And then Christ appears, and he doesn't say, Thomas, forget the wounds, move past them, it's time to believe again. He says something no one could have scripted. He says, put your hand here, into the exact place where everything broke. That is not what you expect from a resurrection story. You expect the wounds to be gone. You expect the message to be, it's over now, everything is healed, move forward. Instead, the wound is still there, the risen Christ carries his wounds. And the pathway back to belief runs directly through them. Not around them. Through them. For 3 years, Thomas walked with Jesus, and the moment where he heard God most clearly was not in the miracles, not in the sermons, not in the mountaintop. It was when he was most willing to reach into what was broken. Something about that deserves to sit with you for a second. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the invitation is terrifying. Going back to the wound, not to wallow, but to actually be present in it, means feeling it again. And your soul has built a very sophisticated system for not feeling it. The going through the motions, that system. The performance in prayer, that system. The spiritual numbness that makes everything feel like cotton wool between you and God, that system. These aren't failures. They are grief responses. They are the deeply human way a wounded soul protects itself from something it isn't sure it can survive again. But here is what that protection system doesn't know. God isn't on the other side of the wound, waiting for you to get past it. He is already inside it. He has been there this whole time, in the specific fracture, in the exact place the church hurt broke something open, in the name of the person whose words still land differently than anyone else's. He did not stay outside the wound and wait for you to heal your way toward him. He moved in. There's something that happens when the wound stays sealed long enough. Months pass, sometimes years. And what was once raw, the kind of hurt that burns when air touches it, starts to change. Not into something healed, into something hard. And hard things don't receive. They deflect. They go through the motions without the marrow. And quietly, without meaning to, you stop recognizing his voice, not because he stopped speaking, but because the walls got so thick the frequency can't get through anymore. One day you realize you've spent so much energy maintaining the performance of faith that you can't remember the last time you actually felt anything in prayer. Not grief, not anger, not longing. Just a flat, sealed silence where the connection used to live. That is the cost of praying past the wound instead of from inside it. And the path back begins with understanding what praying from inside the wound actually means. God did not wait for you to heal before he came to find you. Let that land. He moved into the wound. Not metaphorically, not as a comfort phrase. He is present in the specific place where you were hurt, in the building where it happened, if that's where it happened, in the words that were spoken over you that you still hear, in the silence that fell where trust used to be. He has been in the exact location of your church hurt this whole time. This is why praying from the wound isn't just one path back to his voice. It is the only path that works for someone carrying this particular damage. Not because you have to relive the hurt, but because that is where he already is. And when Thomas reached into the wound, he didn't come out with an explanation for everything that had happened. He came out with contact. That is what becomes possible when you stop praying from the place you think you should be and start speaking from the exact place you actually are. You don't have to fix the wound before you pray. You don't have to get past the church hurt before you can hear God again. You don't have to manufacture warmth you don't feel or perform a faith that isn't fully there yet. You just have to stop pretending you're somewhere you aren't. Because the prayer that actually reaches him isn't the polished one that performs wellness you don't have. It's the one that brings him exactly where you are, guarded, numb, barely holding on, and says, I can't hear you right now. I'm in the wound, but I'm talking to you from inside it. That fractured, unfinished, barely audible thing that is prayer. That is what reconnecting with God after church hurt actually looks like at its beginning. Not a return to what it was before. Something new. Something that starts not from the place you lost, but from the place you're in. There's something you need to know about Thomas. After that moment, after his hand went into the wound, Scripture records the most complete declaration of faith in the entire gospel. Not despite the wound. Through it. Maybe that's where you are right now. Not at the end of something. Not in a place of failure. At the beginning of a prayer that doesn't perform. At the coordinates where he has already been waiting. And maybe, if you're honest enough to speak from exactly where you are, you'll discover that the voice you thought went silent was in the wound the whole time. If this reached something real in you today, share it with someone who's been carrying this kind of quiet. They may need to hear this more than they know.